All right, eukaryotic cells. We're going to move beyond our endomembrane system. So if you recall, the endomembrane system is this progression of information from DNA to RNA to macromolecule, protein, carb, or lipid, and then the distribution of that macromolecule. So all of these we find in that eukaryotic cell. And if you think about energetics, do you think that takes energy to convert DNA to RNA, to move RNA, to transcribe or to translate RNA into protein, to make the carbs, to make the lipids, to distribute these products? Right? Do you think that takes energy? And the obvious answer is yes, it takes cellular energy. And that's going to be the role of this really fascinating organelle that we call the mitochondrion, or mitochondria for plural. So mitochondria is a double membrane organelle, kind of like the nucleus has two membranes. The mitochondria also has two membranes, two hydrophilic, hydrophobic, hydrophobic, hydrophilic, hydrophilic, hydrophobic, hydrophobic, hydrophilic. So two membranes that comprise two different compartments. So I'm going to introduce this now. I hope this makes more sense a little bit later. But we have then this outer membrane, and then we're going to have a little space, and then we're going to have this inner membrane, and then this internal compartment. This internal compartment we call the matrix, the inner mitochondrial membrane, the cristae, this sort of other space on the outside, and then that outer mitochondrial membrane. So think of it like two Target bags, two Walmart bags, two Albertson plastic bags. So you have a plastic bag, and then you have another plastic bag inside the first plastic bag. So we have then that the compartment. You can put groceries or whatever in that bag, or you can put groceries in that second bag. So we have two spaces to put stuff in, right? So if you look at it from top, this is that inside bag where we can put material, or we can put the gum or something on the outside in the second bag, right? So I'll come back to those vocabulary terms, these anatomical terms, but let's kind of get an idea of what the mitochondria does, right? This little caterpillar or footprint sort of shaped organelle, like a bean of some sort, kidney bean. So the mitochondria is an energy processing organelle. Now, I didn't lie to you last time, but I didn't give you the full truth, right? We said that carbohydrates are an energy source, lipids are an energy source. That's true, but our body cannot directly metabolize carbohydrates. Our body cannot directly metabolize lipids. It cannot directly metabolize proteins. It must convert these molecules into something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, right? The mitochondria is the organelle that does the converting, right? It converts carbs into ATP, converts lipids into ATP, converts proteins into ATP. This conversion process is what we call cellular respiration, the production of ATP from a macromolecule source. And this goes back to chapter 2 with that conservation of energy. We know that we can't make energy, we can't destroy energy. All we can do is change the form of that energy. And that's the role of the mitochondria. It converts these macromolecules into ATP. And this is that molecule, adenosine triphosphate. So basically there's an adenine, there's a ribose sugar, it's got that oxygen, and we have a phosphate PO4, a second phosphate PO4, and a third phosphate PO4. So triphosphate, 1, 2, 3 phosphate. So it's basically an RNA nucleotide, 1 + 2 + 3, with now 2 additional phosphates connected. This is that energy molecule for the cell. And that energy molecule is then going to be generated by the mitochondria. So mitochondria are often termed as the powerhouse or the energy supply of the cell. Now, when I talk about mitochondria, I always think back to like Chuck E. Cheese or Peter Piper pizza, not because I'm hungry, but I don't know if you've ever tried to go play games at Peter Piper at Chuck E. Cheese, right? You can't just take regular, American currency, a quarter or dollars, and put them into the games, right? First, you have to convert your American currency into um, Peter Piper pesos or Chuck E. Cheese coins, right? So we have to convert them because those games only function off of those tokens there. So same thing with the body. So our body can't directly use carbs, lipids, or proteins. It has to convert them into ATP. I don't know if you're big gamblers, but you go to Vegas, you can't have big time bucks on the table, right? You have to convert those into chips, and then you can gamble all you want, right? It's the same value, but it's a different form of currency, right? Now, if you take these chips, you can't go to, I don't know, you can't go to the store, you can't go to the mall and pay for stuff with these chips, right? That currency doesn't work outside of the casino. So each environment has its own type of currency. Peter Piper functions on this currency. The casino functions on this type of currency. Regular businesses function on dollars, money currency. The cell functions on ATP currency. So it's a conversion process again. Yeah? So carbs, lipids, and proteins in, ATP out. So carbs, lipids, proteins in, ATP out. So the mitochondria is basically then like that machine at Peter Piper, that black little machine that you put the dollars and then spits out the Peter Piper pesos, right? That's basically the conversion machine. The mitochondria is a conversion organelle that's generating ATP. And the ATP is the same from carbs. It's no different than the ATP that we get from lipids, no different than the amount the ATP that we get from proteins. The only difference is the amount that we get from each of these, but the ATP is the same. So when we're talking about ATP and energy conversion, we talk about energetics. Right? And I don't know how active you are right now with this COVID mess, but maybe some of you are right now are in shape, or maybe some of us are out of shape right now. And what does this mean, right? Getting in shape. When we talk about being in shape, we're usually talking about endurance, cardiovascular fitness. Maybe strength is involved, power, but it's generally like cardiovascular endurance. How long you can perform an activity without getting fatigued. So when we look at your cells, right, sort of genetically, your cells are gifted with an absolute number of mitochondria. So this is not anything you've done. Is mom and dad gave us the genetic instructions to have a certain number, an absolute number of mitochondria in our cells. And beyond that, basically our cells can adapt. We talk about evolutionary adaptation. Well, there's adaptation at an individual cellular level as well. So let's say we start to feel like Rocky, dun, 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 right? We start trying to get in shape. Well, it's going to be difficult at first because we don't have a lot of organelles. So we're going to be feeding them carbs, lipids, and proteins, but we're going to get a very small amount of ATP. So when you start working out, your cells are inefficient. They're not able to generate a lot of ATP. So we fatigue easy and we get sore probably. And a lot of us, oh no, okay, that was not fun, right? But if you continue beyond that first week, 2 weeks, we start to see changes in the cellular physiology, right? So as we start to work out, we start to reproduce our mitochondria. And we keep working out, and we keep working out, and we keep working out, and the workouts start to get easier. We don't get as sore. We can run faster. We can run longer, and we continue until we get in optimal shape. Right? I don't know how many of you have been at this level where your cell is just jam-packed with mitochondria. Maybe so we're training for the marathon. Maybe you train for that big hike. Maybe the big competition, the soccer game, whatever training that you've done. Our cells take a while to get to this point, but they can get to this point, right? And it's a really, really neat modification and adaptation for physical activity that our cells can undergo. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with different athletes, the types of diets that they consume. This is Michael Phelps. I was reading on some of his workouts and his diet while he was training for the Olympics. Most individuals consume about 2,000 calories per day. And that's a fair amount of food per day. When he was in that top, hard training, a lot of swimming, a lot of working out, he was averaging about 9,000 calories per day. How would we look if we consume 9,000 calories for months and months and months and months? Right? You think, man, we'd be this big monster, right? But he's not a big monster. He's very, he was in really, really good shape. So what happened? When you're at this point, people that are in shape, they eat and eat and eat, and they're still always hungry, but they're eating anything they want and they don't gain weight. Right? Because as soon as those macromolecules get into that cell, they're very quickly converted. They're not stored. They're not just sitting there. They're not, they're utilized right away and converted into ATP. So if you're not in shape, this does not make sense. People that work out, they say, oh, I like to work out in the morning because I have energy for the rest of the day. If you're not in shape, that doesn't make sense because you work out and then you're exhausted the whole day, you're sore, you can't do much, right? But if you start to get in shape, then so your cells, again, become so efficient at manufacturing ATP that, you work out and these mitochondria are revving up at, top-notch energy producing organelles there, right? Now, we go back to the idea of these children that are ADHD, right? Little Johnny here, right? Little Johnny is not working out for, a marathon or something like that, but they're just very energetic, very hyper, right? One, it could be linked back to the diet. Maybe there's too much sugar in his diet. Maybe the little kid drank soda or something, right? But assuming that the diet is okay, no caffeine, that kind of stuff, why would this child have so much energy that they can't sit still, right? Can we go back into that genetic absolute number, right? Some individuals just are genetically designed, genetically gifted to generate more ATP at that resting level there, right? So mom and dad may be frustrated, but it's mom and dad that gave them that absolute number of mitochondria, right? And basically, you have these high energy children, and they need that activity, that physical activity, to burn off this energy, right? To help them kind of get back to a calmer state. And a lot of modern education, especially now, kids sitting at home being homeschooled because of the COVID mess, they're not getting that release of energy, right? So again, they have all this excess energy, and it's going to be released by these movements and things like that. So again, part of the diagnosis of ADHD can be linked back to absolute number of mitochondria. Okay, now a different sort of trajectory here, right? So let's say that, man, we've been working out, we are loaded, our mitochondria are packing the cell there, right? And then something happens. So, we have an injury. Ouch, that looks like that hurt really bad there, right? We get sick. Maybe they change your work schedule. They close the gym. Something happens where we can't continue to go back and we basically don't work out for a while. And this is where the body's really cruel, right? It takes a lot of energy to sustain one mitochondria, right? Just like these machines at Peter Piper. It's costing that business electricity to keep these things functional and running. So if two of them is enough, we don't need a third one. We don't need a fourth, a fifth. We don't need 20 of these machines because it's going to cost the restaurant electricity. It's going to cost them energy to keep those functional. So they're going to keep the fewest number possible. And that's what the body will do as well. So there's a metabolic cost of keeping mitochondria. So this would require a tremendous amount of energy to sustain all of those mitochondria. And the body will do it if there's a reason to do so. But let's say we're training, and then boom, we got hurt, right? We're injured. So I'm not gonna say overnight, but very, very quickly, the body then figures out, man, we have all these mitochondria that are eating up too much ATP. They're eating up too much carbohydrate energy, lipid energy. We don't need that much ATP. So basically the body starts to, or I should say the cell starts to remove these mitochondria from that cell. So the body or the cell has the idea that you use them or you lose them. As long as they're doing their job, as long as they're converting, as long as there's a necessity to keep them around, they will, do their job. But if we're not working out, again, it takes weeks or months to get into really good shape, and it takes only a very short amount of time to get out of shape, and that's really sad and it's frustrating. If you all have gone through this, you understand this little sad face there. So if we're not working out, we go back to our absolute number of mitochondria. I don't know if any of y'all have had an injury, you've had a cast, a broken bone. You're very happy to get the cast removed, but when it's removed, you're kind of sad. Oh, look at how scrawny that leg got or that arm got. And you have to then work hard to rebuild up the muscle tissue and get those cells active again. So again, energetics of the mitochondria. So going back to the actual molecule, the ATP molecule, again, adenosine triphosphate. There's our adenine, our ribose, and the phosphate. So an RNA nucleotide plus 2 individual phosphates. And there's a lot of high energy connections, high energy bonds that we see here in those second and third phosphates. So think of it in the idea of like a bow and arrow. The farther that the string is pulled back, the more potential energy it's holding, the farther that it can shoot that arrow when it's let go. So the farther that we're moving that phosphate away from the first phosphate is kind of analogous to stretching that string, right? The farther that we go from that first phosphate, the more energy that it's holding there. So again, we have these 2 high energy bonds, these covalent bonds. This one is high energy. This one is farther, so it's even more high energy than this one. And basically like a piggy bank, right? You can save money in a piggy bank, but when you need money, you have to break the piggy bank then to get the coins. So it took effort to manufacture our 1, 2, 3 phosphates. But when we need energy, we then have to break the phosphate. When I want to shoot the arrow, I have to break the bond. I have to release the string to shoot that arrow. So I hope this little diagram makes sense, right? We have phosphate 1, phosphate 2, phosphate 3. And we go back to chapter 3 where we talk about hydrolysis. So we have a hydrolytic reaction that happens. We release a phosphate, we release energy, and we're left then with 1, 2 phosphates only. So we broke that one bond. You released the phosphate and released that energy that was held in that covalent bond. And now we're not talking about ATP, we're talking about a DP, di meaning 2, right? So adenosine diphosphate and adenosine triphosphate. So high energy, this would be lower energy because some of that energy was released. So if you understand this cycle, you understand energetics of the cell, right? So we need carb energy, lipid energy, protein energy to form ATP, to now reconnect that phosphate to there, to undergo dehydration synthesis there, right? Not the right phrase there, but we want to reform that covalent bond. It's not a macromolecule, but we want to connect that phosphate to the other phosphate, and that takes sort of an investment of energy there. So we make ATP, and then we have ATP. Well, then we have to go burn ATP to run, to keep your heart beating, to keep the brain processing. And when we burn ATP, we're left with a lower energy ADP, and that lonely phosphate. Now we got to send these back to the mitochondria so they can now connect ADP with the phosphate to make ATP. So think of it like your cell phone, right? You charge it full charge, and then all day you're on calls, you're on Instagram, whatever, and then you kind of burn the battery down, right? Well, what do we got to do? We got to go recharge it to go back to full strength so that we can call, be on Instagram, and then have a dead battery. So we can go recharge it to call, to be on Instagram, to text, to have a dead battery. Like money, right? You go to work to make money. And then we have money, we can pay bills, we can go party, you can buy stuff, and then you're broke. So you got to go back to work to make money, to go pay bills, to buy stuff, and then we're broke again. And it's this cycle again. It just keeps repeating from ATP to ADP plus P. And then we reconnect them to make ATP, we burn them off, and we're back at the same point. So that's going on all the time in your cells, right? And this is happening again in the mitochondria primarily. So with that, let me stop it there. And it's a good stopping point for our mitochondrial organelle. We do have a few more organelles that I'll kind of put into the next discussion. And again, we're almost through chapter 7. So there's maybe 2 more little presentations and we should be done. You should have all the material that you need for the next homework and for your next exam.